Greetings, and welcome to this brief introduction to Plato's dialogue, the Clitophon. Now, Plato's Clitophon is by far the shortest of his dialogues, but it packs a punch. Now, typically, Socrates is the hero of Plato's dialogues. This is the only dialogue whose subject is the blame of Socrates. And it's not for not believing in the city's gods and for corrupting the young. This blame is that Socrates is a hindrance, especially to those people whom he has turned towards virtue. But let's back up for a moment. The dialogue begins with Socrates leveling an accusation against Clitophon. He says that someone told us that Clitophon blames spending time with Socrates and exceedingly praises being with Thrasymachus. Now, for this reason and for other reasons, the Clitophon is traditionally taken as an introduction to Plato's Republic. But in any event, Clitophon is alarmed. He thinks Socrates is angry at him. Now, thankfully, they're alone, so he will gladly, he says, respond to this charge. Now, Clitophon admits that he does not praise Socrates in some things, and in other things he does praise him. Socrates seems delighted. He wants to learn from Clitophon and so become better. Now, Socrates practically goaded Clitophon into making this defense. So Socrates clearly wants to hear from Clitophon. What does he learn? Who is Clitophon? On what grounds does he blame Socrates, and is his blame valid? These are the key questions of the dialogue. Now, the rest of the dialogue consists of Clitophon's defense speech. It falls into three main parts. First, he praises Socrates. Second, he recounts some questioning he did of Socrates' companions and Socrates himself. And third, he offers his conclusion. So in the first part, Clitophon's praise of Socrates, it consists of his retelling two speeches that Socrates made. The first speech Clitophon quotes directly, the second he paraphrases. Now this first speech is remarkable. Clitophon likens Socrates to a tragic god who is rebuking the mere human beings. This opening to the speech cannot help but remind us of Socrates' entrance in Aristophanes' comedy, The Clouds. And it's the only time in Plato that we hear Socrates addressing a general audience. So to summarize, in the first speech, Socrates rebukes the human beings with pursuing dynastic wealth rather than remedying their own ignorance of justice, which causes them the greatest evils, and which, in the face of pleasure, can be remedied only through education. Now, why does Clitophon find this speech so moving? Clearly, he seems moved by Socrates' demand that we care about justice rather than wealth. Justice seems a paramount good to him, something that holds together families and cities. Second, he seems impressed by Socrates' focus on education as the path to justice, rather than, say, the law. As a side note, the word law never appears in this dialogue. Unlike the law, which turns citizens to justice by threats, Clitophon seems to want a justice that is inherently attractive to the just person. Now, Socrates' second speech, which Clitophon paraphrases, seems to promise this inherent attractive justice. Socrates says that one should care for justice as the knowledge that governs the use of everything, including your own soul. Justice really is wisdom. Indeed, without this knowledge, it would be better for you to be dead. But in what sense is this knowledge good? Socrates suggests via an image that it is by making the just man a pilot in politics. Justice means wisely ruling others. It suggests that the just man secures his own good, just as a pilot would, precisely when he secures others' good too. Now, together, these speeches bring out Clitophon's hope that there is a truly common good, grounded in knowledge. But if he believes that there is this common good, why wouldn't everyone seek it? Why wouldn't the rest of us hand our lives to the knowers to rule? Now, to be sure, we need education, but why don't we get that education if it's so good for us? Could it be that such a world would strip justice of its appeal? Justice would amount to simply everybody pursuing his own good. We'll come back to this problem at the end. In any event, in the second part of his speech, Clitophon turns to the questions that he asked Socrates' companions and then Socrates himself. In essence, he asked them, what is the work that this knowledge, this art even, of justice produces? The companions offer several responses. It's justice itself. It's the advantageous, the necessary, the beneficial, or the gainful. And then one of them says it's unanimity in cities. Socrates offers him the answer that justice is helping friends and harming enemies, or rather, harming no one. As the conclusion shows, Clitophon is not satisfied with these answers. So what does this questioning reveal about him? First, he seems to want justice to be both a means to something else and an end in itself. As an end in itself, it's the goal of all of our striving, but as a means, it implies that it is devoted to something higher. By maintaining this ambiguity about means versus ends, Clitophon can treat justice as both noble, as devoted to something else, and as good. Second, it's clear that Clitophon wants justice to be politically effective, and he wants it also to consist of some altogether good knowledge. But this is a problem. Knowledge respects no political boundaries. Nor does it seem likely that there's going to be any community that will consist solely of disembodied minds, held together in unanimity. Clitophon's hope for a truly common good, grounded in knowledge, seems paradoxical. But, as he makes clear in the third and final part of his speech, rather than question his own assumptions, Clitophon concludes that Socrates is holding out on him, that Socrates knows what justice is, but won't share that knowledge with Clitophon. He implies that Socrates is unjust. As a result, Clitophon says he's going to go study with Thrasymachus. And unless Socrates changes his ways, Clitophon will continue to blame him, specifically for being an obstacle to those whom he has turned to their becoming virtuous and happy. That's quite a charge. Now, Clitophon makes clear that he thinks that Socrates knows what justice is and won't tell him. He doesn't consider the possibility, though, that Socrates possesses the knowledge and tried to teach it, but that Clitophon couldn't learn it. But why doesn't he consider that? Perhaps because this conclusion would force Clitophon to doubt himself and his abilities. It would force him to consider that perhaps very few people can learn justice and hence become just. Perhaps that seems too unfair. In other words, Clitophon remains attached to justice as a common good. But, as the last words of the dialogue attest, he also remains attached to his own good. This is the only mention of happiness in the dialogue. Clitophon clearly wants to be happy, but he speaks about this goal only in the context of his blame, his angry accusation of Socrates, where the focus is on Socrates' supposed injustice to him, and not on Clitophon's desire to see his own justice most highly rewarded. Maybe Clitophon's evident inability to sort through his own conflicting opinions about justice goes hand in hand with his apparent unwillingness to be forthright about his desire for his own good. Perhaps what Socrates learns from Clitophon is that precisely those people who care about justice, but who are also willing to own up to their desire for their own good, make the most promising students. Thanks for joining this brief introduction to Plato's Clitophon.